the economics of the Panama Canal. Today we discuss Panama is on vogue right now thanks to the recent statements by President Donald Trump talking about maybe taking over again the Panama Canal and saying that it is controlled by China or something like that. Well, today we are not going to get to that rabbit hole if the US is going to take over again of the Panama Canal, but we're gonna talk on how it works, why is so important, and the revenue, the numbers about such landmark of worldwide logistics, economics, and so on. First, let's go with the history of such canal. Of course, the canal is indeed in Panama. Panama has a very particular geographic location, and in Central America, it basically divides the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. First, a treaty was signed in 1903 for, of course, US authorities in order to construct such canal, and of course that gave them to the US their ownership of such infrastructure, and the canal was finished by 1914. So the facility, the canal itself, it has a very simple design. It connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. In the middle, there is a lake called Lago Gatun or Lake Gatun, as you prefer. And basically, any sea ship can go between one ocean to another. And the importance, of course, is that it saves a lot of time of transit for each sea ship going one ocean to ocean, and let's say taking from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It serves the purpose of several shipping routes from China, from the US, West Coast, East Coast, same thing in Europe, the Pacific, Asia, whatever may be the case. Sea shipping is by far the most effective way, of course, on transportation of different goods on the worldwide logistics and supply chains. The total investment of such infrastructure was around 13 billion US dollars. Of course, was expensive back then, and the system is fairly simple. Not necessarily easy to build, of course, not on time and money, but how it works is actually quite a marvel of engineering. You have Lake Gatun that is 27 meters above sea level, and in order to access the Lake Gatun, in the midst of the geography of Panama, in order to access from the Atlantic, you need to use a system of locks in order for a ship, in order to get to Lake Gatun and then access the Pacific and vice versa. And by 2016, Panama finished a second set of locks in order to navigate through the Panama Canal. On this particular case, it was expanded the dimensions for different ships in order to go through this particular route. Other thing that you have to take notice is the importance of the Panama Canal is that it sets the standards for sea ships worldwide. Actually, when most of the sea ships are designed and built, they use the standard of the Panama Canal. This is known as Panamax, and since the new set of locks was inaugurated, now we have the Neo Panamax with these particular measurements. The new set of locks, this particular infrastructure cost a little bit over 5 billion US dollars, and the price tag for the Panama's economy was around 4% of their GDP throughout several years. The importance was that before the second set of locks was built for the use of the Panama Canal, the max capacity for a Panamax sea ship was around 5,000 TEUs. And let me explain first what a TEU is. This particular measurement is a standard worldwide measurement used for container ships, basically 20 feet long on the measurement of a TEU, a single shipping container. And now with the new set of locks, a Neo-Panamax ship can transport up to 15,000 TEUs or 20 feet shipping containers. Now, the fees that the Panama Canal charges for their services are around $150 per TEU. That means that for each 20 feet long shipping container, now most of these ships go between 5,000 and 15,000 of TEUs per cargo, and that costs around the cheapest fee is around 60,000 US dollars, and the most expensive one is around a little bit over 300,000 US dollars. Also, the Panama Canal has a limited capacity. The Panama Canal serves around 34 ships per day, and usually an extra ship is added per day that goes through a bidding process, an auction process that usually costs a premium in order to access on the first place. The process of navigating throughout the Panama Canal, it takes around 10 hours per ship, and since its inauguration over 100 years ago, the Panama Canal has served over 1.2 million sea ships throughout history. Now, we have to take into account when we talk about the Panama Canal, also talk about the Suez Canal in Egypt. That is the direct competition of the Panama Canal. And of course, the Suez Canal is in Egypt and usually serves the routes that go between Europe and Asia. Now, the Suez Canal has a different price structure. They don't charge straight up for TEU shipping containers, but they usually have different rates depending on the cargo, the vessel, the sea ship, whatever might be the case. But usually, roughly, if you want to pinpoint a particular price tag, will be around $50 for a 20-foot shipping container. Now, let's go with the final numbers for 2024. The Panama Canal had a gross revenue of almost 5 billion US dollars, a net income of 3.5 billion US dollars. That means an increase of 9.5% per year, year over year, and the 50% cut that takes the government of Panama was, of course, around 2.5 billion US dollars. And this is significant since the size of Panama's economy is a little bit under 90 billion US dollars. Of course, Panama is a fairly small country, a little bit over 4 million people. That's the total population. Still one of the wealthiest nations on per capita terms in Latin America. And of course, the Panama Canal is arguably the main reason for doing so. Now, let's discuss, just play a little bit, and what's the probability that Donald Trump and the US, they're going to take over the Panama Canal. And since, lately the president, former president, next president, maybe when you're watching this video, the already sworn president of the United States, Donald Trump, is talking about taking over Greenland, also Canada being the 51st state, and right now of taking the Panama Canal. Well, the answer is that would be something close to zero. Not zero, but close to zero. And first, let's discuss that Panama actually has one of the best governance overall in Latin America. Also, they are close allies of the United States. And usually they have a very good diplomatic relationship with most countries all over the world. Panama doesn't have like a sworn enemy or a rival nation, something like that. They have a thing going on with Costa Rica, but it's just, for fun. It's not like they are enemies or something like that. But anyways, the main point is that Panama is just this guy that is friends with anyone, do business with anyone, and they don't get too much on geopolitics or turmoil, things like that. It's a very stable nation. And recently, the current president of Panama, Jose Mulino, he gave some serious remarks regarding this particular announcement from Donald Trump. And he said that he is indeed an ally of the US. However, the canal is not for sale. They are not going to hand it over to the US whatsoever. He was very emphatic in order to do so. But still, he's willing, he's a quite reasonable man, so he's willing to do business, maybe renew the relationship with the US on the terms of the new president. So we just have to wait and see what is going on over there in Panama. But I don't see, a big war or something like that if you are, on your side of the world and you are seeing those news about the Panama Canal, and it's not gonna get into a war conflict or something like that. I don't see that happening. Maybe it's just a negotiation, that Trump likes to talk on hyperbole and things like that. So just see what happens. Now, the only hiccup of Panama with the United States, and it was a big one actually, first started on the late 70s. Back then, the US president was Jimmy Carter, and the Panamanian president was Torrijos. Apparently, it was some social turmoil from the local Panamanians because they felt that they were getting nothing from the canal, that it was built on their soil. Well, apparently the agreement, Carter Torrijos said that the ownership of the Panama Canal, it will be transferred to Panama gradually on the year 2000. A few years afterwards, the President Torrijos died on a plane incident on mysterious circumstances, and I'm not going to get into that. And the next president was this gentleman, Manuel Noriega, that let's say, not necessarily the most diplomatic statesman. He was linked to drug dealing and espionage and things like that on the 80s. So during the H.W. Bush administration on the late 80s, ordered what is known in history as the Operation Just Cause in order to liberate Panama from the dictatorship of Manuel Noriega, and the final operation was, let's call it, a success, quote unquote, with some question marks. But afterwards, actually, Panama it thrived on a democracy, not only on the political system, but also on economics, and became arguably the richest and most prosperous country in Latin America. Thank you for watching Continental Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media, and if you want to work with us, continentalinsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.